Elliot Rodger, and I'm generalizing from Elliot Rodger's case, truth and fantasy, you have to be able to separate the two. You have to be able to identify the addiction and the obsession. And actually, the decision, how you will construct your world, is the conflict, is the struggle between truth and fantasy. Without the fantasy, there's no motivation. The fantasy is the dream, of course. But you can't be addicted to the dream to such an extent that you disregard reality feedback. The world is nothing. Here's how how I'm using my terms. World is nothing but the individual's human realities encounter with resistance out there, and encounter with internal and external resistance. The world is nothing but the struggle between those two and a fantasy. So you have the fantasy, you have the internal resistances, and you have the external resistances to the fantasy. Fantasy is composed of the hot genital strivings, your delusions, your wishful thinking. Delusions being the extent that you bring hope and luck and unprepared dreams into your demand. The demand, of course, is informed by comparison to others, jealousy, possessiveness, wanting to short-circuit the natural competition, not knowing yourself, alibying, justifying, running and hiding. All of this, past engrams, conditioners, your patterns, your inculcated patterns. All of that and more taken together in one sticky mass is what I'm calling the world. So when Elliot Rodger holds the world, I'm going to give the world one more chance before the day of retribution to give me what I want. See if they'll give me, see if I can get justice. This is what he's really talking about. There's no world out there, world qua world. There are symbols, there are objects, inanimate objects in the world that we share together and call by the same names, but it has different meanings. The names, the meanings are evidence of the individual who propagates those names and those meanings and those relationships. That's all it is, in my opinion, and nothing more. There is a primordial need for recognition, for attention, because you see, you cannot do anything. You cannot even generate your world without being recognized and paid attention to. Otherwise, you're in a vacuum. You need something to push against, a resistance to push against. But that demands preparation, it demands experience, and it demands understanding the pitfalls of what you're facing. If you stay in a fantasy like Elliot and his dream of the tall blonde on the Santa Barbara campus, in competition with the tall, muscular, these are Elliot's words, obnoxious brute jock, the Philistine. Contrasting that with an elegant gentleman of haute couture like Elliot Rodger. And then throw into this mix, this struggle for hegemony, the underlying hot genital strivings and the greed principle. And then you mix that up with a kid who is pigeon-breasted, weak in appearance, with an aura of green about him, and you got a volatile combination. You got an individual now hurled into a jungle, completely vulnerable. And the question is, how do you take back the power? How do you take back the power? How do you take back control of your meaning? How do you become a rock and an island and start from the bottom to build up your personality, your style, and your confrontational skills in a world of hominis lupus hominis, man, the wolf to man, and that includes woman. The man who said, the meek shall inherit the earth, well, that man was a fool, practically speaking. And the man who said, women are naturally compassionate and will give to Elliot a hush, that man was a fool, practically speaking. Elliot Rodger is now caught between a rock and a hard place. He's caught in a lot of contradictions and paradoxes. Which contradictions and paradox fuel the delusion? And the delusion only being Elliot has not done a careful self-assessment to understand where he's vulnerable, what his limitations are, in a cold, hard reality that's a motherfucker. He didn't gain self-mastery. He gained mastery through delusions, hallucinations, delusions of grandeur I'm talking about, and psychotic hallucinations. That makes sense if you put it in Elliot's world and Elliot's environment and don't impose your bias upon the analysis. Everybody wants to rush in on a kid like Elliot, put him in pillory and give him a sermon and give him a lot of pithy sayings and a lot of bullshit encouragements and a lot of your self-help gurus who can, like a Tony Robbins, who can break through. With a kid like this, in 15 minutes, Tony gets the breakthrough. If you believe that, I got a Brooklyn Bridge in New York, in Manhattan. I should say well, yeah, that is the Brooklyn Bridge. The Brooklyn Bridge, which I'm selling. I'm selling Trump Tower. Cheap price for you today, if you believe that. This world is not for the passive. That's where Trump's got it right. You have to take names and kick asses. You have to have an aura of intimidation about you to keep the maggots off. And you have to have not the thin, sensitive skin of an Elliot Rodger, but you have to have the leather, tough, hard bark of a fighting man like a Rocky Marciano that I respect entirely. But you gotta, that's why I said in some of my other talks, you gotta get Elliot in top shape. You gotta, first thing you have to do with a kid like Elliot is to isolate him, get him out of the environment, get him off that Santa Barbara campus. And I'm not talking about the bullshit tough love crap. And you have to lure him. You have to convince him and get him to where I'd get him away for 6 months. Give me 6 months. If I had a chance with that kid, I'll train up, put 30 pounds of muscle on that kid. But I have to isolate him. I have to lure him. I have to reward him according to performance. I train him and I watch him like a hawk. I watch him like a hawk. I reward progress generously and with great wisdom, practical wisdom, patience and forbearance. I punish failure to perform. I ask for 100% effort, and then when I get that, I'm going to take more. That's how you handle a kid. That's how I would handle a kid like Elliot. You got to get him in shape first, mentally and physically. You got to put some hard bark on him. You got to put some intestinal fortitude on the kid. And you can only do that by taking him out of the Santa Barbara environment, away from those tall, frustrating blondes, those hot blondes. Elliot's words, not mine. And away separate from those obnoxious brute jocks who are taking everything, which is true in the real world. That's a symbol for the Trumpsters and the other power moguls. Whether the power is by money, Elliot understood that the only way I can compete with a taller, muscular, obnoxious brute jock is to buy him out. That's the lottery, his hope to make killer money and rub opulence under the nose of these obnoxious brute jock and beat them at their game with a different game. Come up with a Lamborghini and cruise up to that campus with that Lamborghini and his fancy Hugo Boss shirt, $200, over $200, fancy trow, Gucci glasses, and a fancy haircut, and just outpower the jock. And that's how you beat obnoxious. It's as competitive and brutal as that. It's not a Bernie Sanders world. It's a Trumpster world that I'm talking about right here. The art of the deal, buddy. The art of the deal.